It is difficult to identify because my first connection to NTL was through the Harvard faculty, Harvard Business School faculty, then called Human Relations. And two of them, Fritz Röttlisberger of Hawthorne Factory, General Electric fame, and George Lombard were the two professors there. And they had,
what was Fritz's last name?
Röttlisberger, Röttlisberger. He came,
Great.
I think.
And George?
George Lombard, Lombard, who was part of the aristocratic part of Boston. And yes. Röttlisberger was an engineer and had gone to Hawthorne, you may remember, to simply record the workers' reactions to having the light, the amount of light on their work vary from little to more to more. And they found, of course, you may remember from that experiment, that it didn't record at all. What did record was the workers' feeling of having somebody's attention. And that became the big finding and shifted the attention of managers to paying attention to the workers, but not to the technologies of this or that, lightning or speed or whatever.
That's great. That's great. And roughly when was that?
That was 1953.
Wow.
And Fritz and George had just returned from their first summer at Bethel. And how organized that was, I wouldn't know, but they thought they could run a group like that with the 5 fellows, training fellows, of whom I was one for that year.
Oh, how fabulous.
And Ronnie, whom you will remember,
absolutely,
was the second faculty on the business school, women faculty at the business school before there were any women students. But she was not allowed in faculty meetings or to go to the faculty dining room. So I had a very interesting year. In fact, I stayed for 2 years, and it was in the second year that Ronnie and I got married. But her status in the school did not change.
Took a long time.
Yes.
Great stories. Let me go back to just these very simple questions, which is, what would you describe as your role?
My role at Harvard was as a, quote, training fellow.
Right. And what would you call? Go ahead.
I had a year's fellowship with residence, all paid, and some small amount to live on. And then that turned into a second year also.
That's fabulous. Where did that fellowship come from?
I have no idea. Ford probably, which was trying to find ways of spending money.
Okay. So now what would you call your profession or your role?
Well, now I think I am a NTL kind human relations trainer, but I am also more have a career in institution building.
Mhm.
The book that has come out of that next week is called Building Integrated Collaborative Institutions, colon, a career on 4 continents.
Wow. I'm jotting this down as we go.
Yes,
But actually,
and
you could send me the video.
this book is the first in NTL Institute's new series of publications.
Oh, great.
So it coincides with the 75th anniversary. And you may not know that it also coincides with the 50th anniversary of the Indian offspring,
Aha.
which Uday Parikh and I created in the 1960s.
I love it. That's wonderful. And so this has been a long time coming. You started very, very early. I think NTL was actually started in 47. So you were a very early involved person with this. That's great.
Yes,
So I know your gender is male. And what would you call your race?
I couldn't hear that.
What would you call your race? I would think Caucasian.
I was German born.
They've asked.
I was German born, escaped Hitler, became British, and now have 2 nationalities, namely British and American. I need to add, importantly, that when I came to the States, to Harvard, I brought with me a connection with the Tavistock Institute,
Uh-huh.
and that was maintained. In fact, when I retired fairly recently, I went to Bethel to join up with Harold Bridger, one of the Tavistock people, and did Tavistock style training programs with Harold for, I don't know, 10 years.
Uh-huh.
Every summer, I would go to Bethel to do that.
Yes. That's great. Well, Kathy Royal, who is really organizing these interviews and helping to pull it together, has been in Bethel doing interviews. So I'm not sure what's happening there now, but there are still people going to Bethel, but not like in the old days when I first went there. So, and your age now, Rolf?
It's 98.
Whoopee! And going strong.
Well,
But just from, yeah.
Well, going as strong as I go.
Yes, that's true. Well, you're looking wonderful, I must say. My friend who overheard our conversation the other day, you know, they'll cut this out of the clips that they make from this. I had on speakerphone because that was easier for me to hear you. And I told her that you were 98, and she said, boy, it's clear he's still got all of his marbles. I said, absolutely.
I hope to travel to Edinburgh for the second
Ah.
meeting of Kate Cowie's Wicked Company this September.
And tell me what that program is again.
It is Kate Cowie's Wicked Company.
Okay.
Across the world congregation of institution building, and Kathy and I opened that first meeting, and I
Oh,
hope
how great.
again.
That's
So,
super.
Kathy can talk more about that.
Okay, that's wonderful. So, okay, let me then, that's sort of all of those specific questions, but this one, you've had such an incredibly long history with NTL and in doing this work very early on. The question now really is to ask you to tell me the story of some experience you had with NTL, whether that was as a participant or as a staff member, some specific time that was particularly memorable, particularly important to you. It was one of your very best experiences with NTL. So tell me that story.
I think I would focus my story on Uday Parikh. In 1962, I think it was, I went to Delhi to hear Erik Erikson's first lecture in India. And it was about a biography that an Indian had written about an Indian philosopher. And during that session, rather uncharacteristically, I must have made some remark that a stranger to me came up afterwards and asked me about. And that stranger was Uday Parikh. And Uday Parikh had been trained by a senior NTL trainer in the States. And thought of himself as belonging to NTL. And he asked me what I was doing in India, and I told him about building the new Institute for Small Industry Development. And he said he was interested in that, and would I be open to his coming to join me? And
wonderful.
And in fact, he gave up his career in the Indian Ministry of Agriculture, a lifelong career in which he taught doctoral students, and gave that up in order to join me in Hyderabad. And that is how we two became alter egos, and we've written, I don't know, a half dozen books together. And then this is directly relevant to NTL and ISAPS. We created a program for small group trainers. And when we had done that for a year or two, we opened it to the faculty of the new institutes of management in India. And we ran that program with, I'm trying to remember his name, a person who at one time was asked to become director of NTL. His name
Uh-huh.
starts with an A. I'm just bad at names now.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
You're not alone. So
so
you've been spreading all for a long, long time.
yeah, and it's kind of in and out in whatever shape um, it takes. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the bases for my career and of the book is that, quotes, I go with whatever is to hand,
Uh-huh.
not along some theoretical track, but you use whatever is to hand and build the institutions around that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
NTL would have, and what is called Lewin would have gone with that because he kept on
Mm-hmm.
doing things with whatever was to hand, whether it was
Mm-hmm.
working with housewives on what the diets could be during the war, or whether it was
Uh-huh.
with fellow trainers with what you could train in tea groups.
Uh-huh. That's fabulous. So if there's so much in that story and all the others that you've said, if you could say, what is it for you that made it so exciting, significant, and memorable? How would you crystallize that? Was clearly very rich experience, but what else made it really come to mind as the story to tell now?
You know, Barbara, that I spent the war in London after leaving school in a war factory. And there were 500 people or so in this factory in West London under bombardment. And I couldn't understand why the management of that factory was so mysterious that the foremen were unapproachable, that the inspectors were behind locked doors, that everything, the machines were spaced far apart, presumably to stop the machinists from talking to each other. And we were working 63-hour night shifts for years on end, 7 days a week. So this, if you will, inhumanity made so little sense to me. So when the war was over and I had my basic economics degree by mail during the war, I spent time reading in the British Library and wrote a book called Incentives and Management in British Industry. And Routledge published that, believe it or not. I sent it.
Who had published?
I typed it and sent it to them because they declared that they were publishers. And indeed, yes, 1949.
Wow. Okay. Now, let me just understand clearly. Did you read that book or did you write that book?
I wrote that book. And was
great.
The solitary author of it. And it has, I think, 800 footnotes because it really traced the history of what I was after. I had no idea that I was producing something very original, but apparently it turned out to be so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How did this fit with your meeting of Uday? Was it before you met him then?
Oh,
Just before?
long before.
Ah,
I met Uday. The book is 1949.
And it was 1962 that you had the conference in Delhi. I see.
It followed an earlier project with Ronnie, which was called Aloka. It also resulted in a book of, of working with young public servants in newly independent countries. We are talking about post-Second War.
Yeah.
And that's what took us immediately after marriage to Ceylon and then to South India. And the work with Uday was my second big project in India.
Great. So in all of that, what did you personally find rewarding or satisfying? I hear all of what you had done. What was meaningful about that work to you? I can infer it, but I'd love to hear it from your own reflection. Why did this matter?
I felt fully used, fully participating as a person in whatever I was doing. So in the training center, we thought most important was to have these post-colonial younger people experience not the top-down life in their traditional families, but in community of working with others, not down on others. And so in the training center, we had developed a way of becoming a community and made that explicit and created teaching cases around that experience and had the young people learn to write cases and work with others in this egalitarian fashion as against colonial top-down fashion. And that's what we took into the second project in India, and that's what intrigued Uday also.
Okay. So I'm hearing in all of that, it's opening up the eyes of people who were newly independent countries to a whole new way of working. Instead of the top down, how to create and work effectively in community.
That's right. And
is that okay?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And the Ford Foundation representative in India had himself come out of the agricultural extension service in the United States and thought that the consulting group for this new institute ought to contain an extension education person. And that's what I became, the consultant for extension education to this new institute in Hyderabad, which incidentally has survived and become international.
It's wonderful. So I've already heard in in much of what you've said, if you will, the embedded values that are things that you value deeply, things that you value about your work and in learning community and about yourself. So in your work, one of the things I very specifically heard you say is that you believe it's very important to participate fully, as a person in whatever situation you would find yourself in. So that sounds like one key value to me, participating fully as a person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think
Okay.
you've put it very well. It had a consequence. The psychoanalytic way that Tavistock Institute essentially worked with did not allow contact with participants by the quote trainers. And that didn't work at Aloka. And to the contrary, we interacted with the full-time live-in participants.
Yes.
And when they raised questions about this relationship to the trainer, we transferred that to the Tavistock style training sessions every day for those 3 months to sort that out. The notion of leadership, the notion of helping, the notion of running sessions like that.
That's
so
great.
It offended, in many ways, some very real professional guidelines that were then and are still part of the psychoanalytic tradition. And that made problems with me, with the trainers from Tavistock Institute and NTL in the summer.
So it's interesting that you were doing work in Bethel with a Tavistock longtime professional.
Yes.
And how did you bridge that difference, or how did you address it?
Well, I didn't have problems with doing it my way, but he had problems with doing it.
Okay.
And so we, after I don't know how many years, we decided to keep working together, but rather differently.
How so? How differently?
Well, I respected his wish that we not work with participants outside the sessions. And I said that in NTL also.
Okay. And do you still hold that view? Or if you're just doing it based on all of your experience, would you open contact beyond during the sessions?
Yes, I would, because it engages me more fully.
Okay, so maybe I want to make sure I understand. You're saying, yes, you would allow contact outside of sessions as well, because it allows greater contact?
I would ask the participant to raise her or his questions in the sessions themselves.
Yes. I remember that clearly as one of the cardinal rules, but it's not as if you don't exist outside of session. So you wouldn't ignore one another, but if there's any group issue or business, ask them to bring it into the group. So again, the whole group can be addressing it. Yes?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm hearing the other piece that I think has been implicit in your stories so far is valuing that the work itself has consequence, that there's some tangible result of the work that you've been doing with these various groups.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. So it's
emphasis,
full engagement. Yeah.
the
Go
emphasis
ahead.
on focusing on getting concrete, practical results,
Yes.
not on conforming to some theory about it.
Yes. And through that practical work, you yourself have distilled your theory based on these values and what you saw worked to enable you to actually work with these groups in ways that got concrete, practical results. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, I think you've put it very well indeed. And that's
Okay.
what the book is about.
Great.
It
I
has,
can't wait to read the book.
well, indeed, it has 6 chapters, one each of my major institution building career events, and then draws theory from that. Theory,
Okay.
I mean generalizations, to be
Yes.
further developed.
Excellent. No, that's terrific. Okay, so I know that this one may be tricky for you, knowing you as I do. What is it that you value about yourself? Perhaps as a friend or as a professional or as a tremendously contributing member of NTL. You've already said you bring your whole self, you participate fully, and you do that whether or not what you may be contributing conforms with some predetermined theory or expectation within the system. So that's clearly something you value about yourself, yeah?
I think you're summarizing these ideas so very well. I can't improve on that.
Okay.
I need to feel that I am growing myself also, and believe that itself is a contribution if I can be
Yes.
open enough about it, so that I can also, as well as I can, describe that to others if they want to know.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's challenging for me to not add what it is that I value about you, and in the context of NTL. But because I'm in the role of the interviewer, I will leave it simply open-ended to say, does anything else occur to you in terms of what you value about what you personally bring to this work, bring to friendship? Anything else?
I feel a great need to mention Ronnie's part in all this. She came from a Lutheran mid-US family. They were quite against our getting married, me from a Catholic background, she from Norwegian Lutheran a
Yeah.
mid-US background. But we, and then when I first got to know her, she was part of a therapy group based on Ferenzi's way of psychoanalysis, which meant being very close to people. Izette Forrest was the practitioner in Boston for that, and Ronnie was
Give me the name again. I couldn't catch that name, Rolf.
Izette, Izette. I speak from memory. De Forrest, Forest, and she had her patients living with her. So Ronnie came with that tradition, if you will, of inclusion, of very close personal connection. And so we did that with each other for a lifetime. We were married for 63 years. And she was a little older than I. So she died when she was only 98.
Only, yeah.
So, and I see it in our children. Nandini, who's also a co-author along with David of the book, you know, is the global director of organizational growth for the new Siemens energy company.
Oh, wow.
The stock exchange just this year for non-carbon energy. And she is guiding Siemens from the energy based on coal and servicing around the world the equipment for that to changing to totally non-carbon energy.
Fabulous.
So
fabulous.
So she represents the corporate world for the book, and David more the academic side of what people need to learn.
Yeah. And you, the nonprofit or governmental entities in particular?
And the book is about my experience, which overlaps, of course, with Nandini as a daughter, and then a fellow practitioner, and David, who's been my alter ego now for 40 years. Here in Japan. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I do want to add one thing to see if you would agree with it. And this really comes from my experience with you and with all the values you've already talked about the depth of inclusion. I would add to that a steadfastness, that you don't just create community and then move off to create another community. You stay in community in a very steadfast way, with people that you met and worked with years and years ago, as well as people that you work with or know, or even are just friends at this point. Does that steadfastness ring a bell for you?
Absolutely. And more than you already know, because my main trouble with institution building as of now is that the people who do this don't pay early enough and thorough enough attention to the potential new people to take part in that and to develop
Mm.
a bigger context for institutions that have this inclusive and collaborative character.
Mhm.
So my urging is that we need to learn to pay a bigger attention to the potential
Mhm.
others to involve in larger systems of
Mhm.
integrated collaborative institutions.
Yes. Fabulous.
And I think that's directly
Well,
to NTL.
uh-huh. Agreed. Totally. So let me shift again. I think we could continue on the values and on the best experience for days, Rolf, given your long experience in all of this kind of work. Let me ask you, when you reflect on NTL and on your experiences with it, what do you see as really a core value? You know, what stands out about how NTL has lived its mission and vision that may be particularly relevant as we look at the future? A core value of NTL.
I think the work on the racial issues here in the United States is absolutely basic. I think the NTL has been better verbally than in actual behavior.
Mhm.
We need to integrate more and more deliberately and stay with the problematic of that, both on the
Mhm.
sexual side and on the racial side. We
Mhm.
really do need to include absolutely everybody, including young and white-haired and women and bisexual and absolutely everybody. And
Mhm.
treat that not just as a pronouncement, but as something that we actively insist on doing in our
Mhm.
programs.
That's wonderful.
And of course, I look to NTL to have this bigger view of urging institutions to become bigger and to associate with others like themselves and get the whole notion of integration and enlarging into a
Mhm.
daily practice.
As you talk about this, I hear again that, you know, to enlarge their idea of what's possible and then to really translate that into daily practical action that makes the language become tangible, so that it's not just great talk and great language, but we're really advocating for the reality of acting on those values of inclusion and expanding the notion of what inclusion means. It's no longer just Black, white, men, women. You've got lots of other permutations of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
You put it very well. Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's exciting. So what else, when you think of the future of NTL, what are your wishes for us in addition to doing what you've just described?
Well,
And
I think that
I'm hearing it,
I think that would
may
be
I just add one, let me just add one more piece that's occurred to me in terms of what you've just said. It's
yes,
it's really increasing the practicality of the work that NTL does in terms of inclusion. Increasing the practicality and the results orientation, making it a daily practice, not just great language, not just hiring a diversity manager.
yes. I think you've got it
Okay.
absolutely right. It needs to be
Mm.
part of our lives, uh, integral, the criteria by which we judge, quote, success.
Uh-huh.
Just keep going and don't think that this or that indicator will serve that purpose. Those
Uh-huh.
indicators, those indicators also will develop as we go if we are severe enough about assessing the value of what we're doing.
That's great. That's wonderful. And that's a really big wish for our future that builds on what we've certainly begun, and I dare say have been a pioneer in, but you're wanting it to become much broader in inclusion and to build into it the tangible outcomes so it becomes more real in action in our own institution as well as in large institutions that we're working with. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, as of now, I think NTL may learn to identify funding and organizational arrangements by which there is a kind of experimental side to NTL's,
Mhm.
also deliberate, uh, open to research and and uh, and recording, rigorous recording, so that we have something to say to the wider world also,
Uh-huh.
our own experience of pushing the boundaries on integration and inclusion.
Okay. Just jotting this down as we go. Well, this is a lot. I'm loving what I'm hearing and learning from you. So, and as we draw this to a close, as I hear the lawnmower outside, the garden crew has arrived for the friends I'm staying with. Is there anything else in particularly that you would like to add to this? As you reflect on NTL, the wishes, the high points.
Barbara, I think you've been so good about summarizing, about restating what I've been trying to convey, that I think I'm done. Uh, uh,
Uh-huh.
I think that the implications of what we've been talking about are quite varied, and I look for a kind of maybe more rigorous identification of what we know to do that works and what we would like to explore and see if it works and get funded for these, if you will,
Yes.
experimental, innovative directions, and not keep mixing and messing it all up together.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. And in ways that sounds very much like recreating more of the way NTL functioned when it was young, when it was new. There was a lot of funding engaged in it, and I'm not aware what kind of funding sources we have now, other than just the fees that that people pay to come to the courses, which doesn't necessarily, well, it's difficult for one person in an organization to push that rock up a hill, if you will. You know, but when you get a group of people, when you get a community wanting to create change, and especially when that community includes all levels of people in the organization, then you can really begin to create what they envision together, which does raise the question of NTL's traditional pattern of functioning primarily as a training organization rather than an organizational development organization.
Yeah, I think uh, that's well short of what I'd like to see NTL be, which
Mhm.
ought to have an identifiable, credible part of resources that is devoted to paying tight attention to what is new, what has to be explored, and ought to be funded for those innovative functions from foundations and others. I don't think NTL has that kind of standing now
Yeah.
with funders, and ought to have.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Rolf, this is so wonderful to talk with you. I think that you're feeling done. I'm never feeling done talking with you, but this has given us tremendously rich information. And I'm hoping that you and I can just stay in touch virtually through using Zoom if you're game to do that in the future. But I think we've concluded our preparation for the 75th anniversary Jubilee.
Yes, I think absolutely yes. And personally, indeed, yeah, I propose to stay in touch as well as I can.